But Mrs. Kehoe, I want to follow up on your statement. Was really, I think it sums up a lot of the frustrations that so many of us have, where you just stated, where the EPA stated, because we can. Can you elaborate on that a little bit more, what you just mentioned? I find that remarkably arrogant. I find that an agency that certainly dismisses the rule of law. I think there are example after example after example, and it's not just members from this committee. I'm always surprised why this committee, on a bipartisan basis, isn't more focused on making sure federal agencies follow the law. Right now, the EPA, in the last 2 Supreme Court terms, lost the EPA versus Utility Air Regulators case in the Supreme Court, lost the EPA versus Michigan case, has a stay on the WOTUS case where over 30 states have sued, and in an unprecedented action, the U.S. Supreme Court put a stay on the Clean Power Plan. So the EPA is losing every single major rule that they are undertaking in the courts with Obama administration officials, other officials who are federal judges, saying the EPA is overstepping its legal bounds. And you may have seen what Gina McCarthy said on TV on the eve of the EPA versus Michigan case. When asked if she thought they were going to win the case, she said yes. They didn't. But then she said, quote, even if we don't win the case, it was 3 years ago. Most of the states, companies are already in compliance. Investments have been made. We'll catch up. So it's kind of like, hey, even if we lose, we win because everybody had to abide by the law. I think that is outrageous, and it's the source of frustration that so many Americans feel. And can you just elaborate on this because we can quote? I just find it the height of arrogance. Just for everybody's information, the EPA is supposed to abide by the law. And the federal courts are showing in the last 3 years they don't. Because we can is not an appropriate answer on people who work for you.
Yes, sir. Senator, thank you. It is disheartening. We as state regulators find ourselves in that position every day as we effect regulation to make sure that we follow the law that's set forth.
Of course.
We do not create
That's
law.
what we're supposed to do, right?
We implement law. And so it is frustrating as we sit, and admittedly, I had very short notice that this federal plan was coming at the time. So I felt like it was a genuinely honest question to understand so I could communicate effectively why requirements were being adding to the state plan. And it was very disheartening at a minimum and very frustrating or perhaps violation of trust to answer it with, we can.
So they didn't attempt to cite a law or a reg, they just said, because we can. Sounds like a king to me.
The discussion went from a statement where Arkansas made that we are on a glide path with the regional haze rule to actually advance and comply early, and that we were doing everything in our state plan that was required under the law. They went in and then beyond that statement discussed a provision about rate of progress and how they could require additional requirements under this phrase of rate of progress. And we question that when we have a rate of progress that already exceeds the time or shortens the timeline, and we actually achieve compliance early. And so it became a bit of a circular conversation, to be honest with you, that it was around, there's a phrase in the law, it says we can go beyond BART sources to seek a better rate of progress. And that was where they left it. And we did not end with a positive outcome at that. And obviously we continue to discuss that with EPA today.
Mr. Chairman, do I have time for one more question? I see that there's no other remaining.
Well, you don't have time, but go ahead.
I just want to follow up just on the issue of consultation where, one of my frustrations, and I had been the Attorney General of the state of Alaska and the Commissioner of Natural Resources, but we often found that the consultation either didn't exist or was very cursory. And And yet, in every statute that we're talking about, the Clean Air Act, the Clean Water Act, every EPA-focused statute, the consultation requirement is not optional. It's mandatory. So I would just like any of the witnesses here to, if you have a sense on, do you see the consultation more as just a box check when you indeed get it, or do they try to actually listen and implement your concerns? Because one of the things that we've seen is a one-size-fits-all rule from Washington rarely works, whether it's Alaska or Vermont or Arkansas or South Dakota. So I'm wondering about your experience with mandatory consultation. That's what it is in all the laws. It's mandatory. Do you feel that you're getting that enough? Maybe I'll start with Mr. Perner.
Senator, I think it's more of they check the box, in my opinion. A lot of these proposals that come out, there's a public comment period. We comment along with everybody else, but just in this example with the Clean Power Plan, they received what, 1.6 million comments or something. So if you're talking a state to federal agency consultation process, I wouldn't consider submitting one set of comments, which we submitted under the governor's signature, though, as being a state to federal agency consultation.
Anyone else on the consultation issue? Sir.
Senator, if I may, I co-chair a committee at National Association of Clean Air Agencies, and I can just tell you that EPA is present on every call. They attend it, and that's not just with my committee, but other committees with the organization has the presence of EPA staff. They bring their thinkings to us. They share early drafts. They explain some of the, so that may be a good place to plug in a conversation with EPA. Could they do better? In some instances, yes. We hit this friction and tension between guidance and flexibility. He said you wanted the rules. I understand. I said they want to go to rulemaking. Rulemakings are rigid. The guidance gives you a little more flexibility, so we've got to be careful what we ask for of EPA and make sure that they can produce what it is that we want. So the rules set the minimum standards. Guidance provide some technical assistance, and the rest of it is our responsibility to collaborate and cooperate and get done.
Thank you.
I would add to that, I'm on the executive committee of the Environmental Council of the States, and EPA is at every meeting and comes on to monthly calls if we ask them to. So they're, as described by Ali, they've made themselves remarkably available to us. In our region, as we're developing our performance partnership agreement, they also, in Region 1 at least, are offering tremendous flexibility in terms of how we're going to be managing our obligation under our delegated programs. And of course, they could always do better. One of the places, there's a difference between listening and agreeing. And so I think they do a great job listening. They don't always agree, and that's really, I think, in part some of the frustrations that you sometimes hear from my colleagues. They tend in this administration, we tend to agree with them more, so we're not dissatisfied with the level of attention that we're getting from them in this dialogue.